Okay, so we've gotten a few requests from listeners to look into this Scott Bessent guy.
Oh yeah, he's interesting for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not every day you find a hedge fund manager who's worked with George Soros and is now advising Donald Trump.
Right, like those are two names you don't normally see in the same sentence.
Exactly. So we've got articles here from Bloomberg, the New York Times, and even a few opinion pieces that dive into his, uh, let's call it a colorful history.
Yeah, there are definitely some strong opinions out there about him.
For sure. And, he's been in the middle of everything from Wall Street to the White House to even these culture wars everyone's talking about.
Oh yeah, he's not afraid to get involved in a good controversy.
Not at all.
Oh
So let's
crap.
try to unpack this and see what we can learn about this guy, this Scott Bessent, and maybe even something about the forces shaping our world right now.
Sounds good. Let's dive in.
Okay, so first off, can we just acknowledge how wild it is that this guy, Bessent, is working with Trump?
Seriously, it's like the most unlikely alliance ever.
Right. This is a guy who supported Al Gore back in the day.
And was Sorens's right-hand man for years?
Exactly. And now he's buddy-buddy with Trump, who, loves to bash the very establishment Bessent comes from.
It's mind-boggling, and Trump's even publicly praised him, like really talked him up.
Yeah, and there were even rumors about him being considered for Treasury Secretary if Trump wins again.
It's crazy to think about.
It is. And there's this one anecdote that really stuck with me. It was when Bessent compared Trump's rising approval ratings to a stock that's performing well, even when there's negative news.
Oh yeah, that's a classic Bessent move.
Right. Like to him, it signals some kind of underlying strength, a potential that maybe others are missing.
Yeah, he's always looking for those hidden signals, those things that tell a different story than what's on the surface.
It's fascinating how he sees those parallels between markets and politics.
He's definitely not your typical Wall Street guy.
Not at all. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's rewind a bit.
Okay, back to the beginning.
Yeah, so how did this guy, Scott Bessent, go from like small town South Carolina to Wall Street and then end up in Trump's inner circle?
Well, it's actually a pretty interesting journey.
Okay, lay it on me.
So he starts out in this small town, right? First job at 9 years old, pumping gas.
Wow, ambitious kid.
Yeah, and his dad had some financial struggles, so he saw firsthand the impact of, economic ups and downs.
That must have shaped his worldview early on.
Definitely, and he considered going to the Naval Academy, even got accepted.
Oh, wow, so a completely different path.
Yeah, but he ended up going to Yale instead.
Why the change?
Well, it's a bit personal, but it involved him coming to terms with his sexuality.
Oh, okay.
And at that time, being openly gay in the military just wasn't really an option.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So Yale it was, and that's where he discovered this passion for finance.
So that's where it all began.
Pretty much, and there was this one pivotal moment he met James Rogers.
Oh, is that?
He was Soros's first partner, like the guy who helped him build his empire.
Oh, wow, so that's a pretty major connection.
Yeah, and this connection led to Bessent getting involved in that famous bet against the British pound back in '92.
I've heard about that. Wasn't that a huge deal?
Huge. Soros Fund Management made over $1 billion from that one trade.
Wow, $1 billion.
Yeah, and Bessent played a key role in that, so his reputation was made after that.
Talk about a career launching moment.
Seriously, he became a Wall Street star practically overnight.
And it sounds like he just kept going from there. Right?
Yeah, he ended up becoming Soros's chief investment officer and made some amazing calls, like betting against the Japanese yen in 2013.
Another big win.
Massive.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of track record that led him to start his own firm, Key Square Capital Management.
So he went from working for one of the biggest names in finance to striking out on his own.
Exactly. And he specializes in this thing called macro investing.
What's that exactly?
It's basically about analyzing global events, economic trends, all that stuff, to try and predict those big market movements.
So it's like seeing the whole chessboard, not just focusing on one piece.
Exactly. It's about understanding those forces that drive markets on a global scale.
It sounds intense.
It is, but he's good at it. And even though Key Square is smaller than some of those giant hedge funds, they've still done really well.
Ooh, how well?
In 2022, they had a 31% return.
31%.
Yeah, not too shabby, especially with all the market volatility we've seen.
No, it's pretty impressive.
And it goes back to what we were saying earlier about him seeing those hidden signals, those opportunities that others might miss.
So we've got this guy who's worked with Soros, one of the most, let's be honest, controversial figures in finance.
Oh, yeah, he's definitely got a reputation.
And now this guy, Bessent, is advising Trump, who, let's face it, is also a controversial figure.
To put it mildly.
Exactly. It seems paradoxical, right?
It does on the surface. Yeah.
So what's the draw? Why is Trump, who's not exactly known for sharing the spotlight, so drawn to someone connected to Soros?
Well, the thing is, Trump apparently really admires Soros's financial success. Yeah, he's even asked Bessent about potentially working for him, like back when Bessent was still at Soros Fund Management.
That's wild.
It is, and it kind of shows that for Trump, it's not always about ideology, it's about results.
So he sees Bessent as someone who can help him achieve those results.
Exactly. Like maybe Bessent holds the key to unlocking that same level of financial success, even if it comes from someone with different political views.
So it's more about pragmatism than anything else?
I think so, yeah.
It, so it's not purely ideological. It's about Trump wanting to tap into Bessent's expertise, that Wall Street magic.
Right, because maybe, just maybe, that magic can be applied to Trump's own economic agenda.
Makes you wonder what kind of conversations they have behind closed doors.
Oh, definitely. But, there's another layer to this whole story, one that goes beyond just finance and politics.
Oh, what's that?
Well, it's the whole culture wars thing.
Ah, right. Can't forget about that.
Nope, and Bessent's been right in the middle of it.
Like how so?
Well, there was that whole controversy at his son's former school, St. Bernard's.
I vaguely remember that. What was that all about again?
He basically pushed back against what he saw as the school becoming too liberal, too focused on, all the things that tend to trigger those on the right.
So he wasn't afraid to get involved, even in something as, let's say, sensitive as his son's education.
Not at all. And he's also disagreed with some of the stuff that Soros's Open Society foundations do.
Oh, wow. So even when he was working for Soros, he wasn't afraid to challenge him on certain things.
Yeah, there was even this incident where Bessent threatened to resign if the foundation restricted investments in companies doing business in Israel.
That's pretty bold.
Yeah, he's definitely got strong convictions, and he's not afraid to stand up for them, even if it means going against the grain or ruffling some feathers.
So he's not just some numbers guy. There are these core beliefs that drive him.
Absolutely. And those beliefs seem to inform his approach to everything, from his personal life to his professional decisions.
And now it looks like those convictions are influencing policy, even though he's not a politician in the traditional sense.
Right. He's found a way to exert influence from outside the system, which is pretty interesting in itself.
It is. So through his convictions, we see his economic philosophy starting to take shape.
Right. And one really clear example of that is this 3-3-3 plan he's presented to Trump.
Oh, yeah. I've heard about that. What's the deal with that? What is it exactly, and what does it tell us about Bessent's approach to economics?
Well, that's kind of like his economic manifesto.
Okay, dramatic, but I like it.
Yeah, and it's all about achieving 3 main goals.
Okay, hit me.
First, cut the budget deficit to 3% of GDP.
Ambitious.
Definitely, then, achieve 3% GDP growth through deregulation.
So very pro-business, pro-growth.
Exactly. And finally, increase oil production by 3 million barrels per day.
So energy independence is a big part of it.
Huge. It all points to this very pro-growth, fiscally conservative approach.
Yeah, it's a classic conservative playbook, but it's interesting that Bessent came to these ideas through his own analysis of the markets and the global economy.
Right. Like for him, it's not just about ideology, it's about what he believes will actually drive growth and prosperity.
Makes sense.
And one thing that really jumps out from this plan is Bessent's concern about the national debt.
Yeah, that seems to be a major theme for him.
It is. He believes in promoting economic growth as a way to generate more revenue and ultimately tackle that debt.
So it's a long-term view.
Definitely he's playing the long game here.
Okay, so we've got this bold plan, ambitious targets, and it seems like Trump is receptive to these ideas.
Oh, yeah, especially the deregulation and boosting domestic energy production parts.
Right, it aligns perfectly with his America First agenda.
But what's interesting? This whole approach isn't necessarily limited to Republicans.
Oh, you mean like some Democrats might agree with some of these ideas?
Exactly. There are plenty of Democrats who believe in the power of markets and economic growth.
So Bessent's position is actually more nuanced than it might appear at first glance.
Way more nuanced. He's operating outside of those traditional partisan lines, working with whoever he thinks can achieve the results he wants, regardless of their party.
And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of Bessent. His willingness to make these bold predictions.
Oh, yeah. He's not afraid to stick his neck out there.
You're talking about the Kamala crash, right?
Bingo! He's predicted a potential market crash if Kamala Harris wins the election.
That's a pretty, let's say, provocative statement.
It is, but it stems from his belief that some of the policies favored by certain Democrats, like increased regulation and government spending, could be really bad for the economy.
So he's basically saying that those policies could lead to instability and ultimately a crash.
That's the gist of it. And he's not afraid to voice those concerns, even in situations where he might get some pushback.
Yeah, like at that grants conference where he got confronted about Trump's policies only benefiting the wealthy.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one.
He didn't back down at all, even in a room full of potential critics.
Nope, he stood his ground. He loves a good debate. And he's definitely not afraid to challenge the status quo.
He's a confident guy, that's for sure.
And outspoken to a fault.
So we've got this picture of Bessent as this brilliant, but maybe a little abrasive financial wizard.
That's a pretty good summary.
But there's this other side to him, right? This more personal side that we haven't really touched on yet.
Yeah, there's more to him than just numbers and predictions.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's this personal side you're talking about?
Yeah.
What else shapes Scott Bessent's worldview and influences his decisions?
Well, to understand that, we need to dig a little deeper into his personal life, his relationships, the experiences that have shaped who he is today.
Okay, now you've got me hooked. Let's explore that.
Let's do it. You know, one thing that really strikes me about Scott Bessent is how comfortable he seems around power and influence.
Yeah, like he's been rubbing shoulders with the elite for decades, right?
Exactly. Wall Street, the Trump family's whole social scene.
He was even close with Blaine Trump, Robert Trump's ex-wife.
Yeah, like really close, apparently.
So there's this personal connection that adds a whole other layer to his involvement with Trump. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about policy or economics. It's about these personal relationships, social dynamics, all that.
It makes you wonder how his personal beliefs actually line up with the policies he's pushing.
Right. Like, where does he draw the line?
Especially considering he's openly gay and has supported LGBTQ plus rights. But he's allied himself with a president whose, let's be honest, base is often seen as pretty socially conservative.
Yeah, that's a tough one to reconcile.
It is. It makes you think about the compromises people make when they're operating at that level, you know?
Oh, yeah. Like, what are you willing to overlook or accept to achieve your goals?
It's a question we could all probably stand to ask ourselves.
Definitely. And it's not like this is his first time dipping his toes into the political pool, you know?
Right. He supported Al Gore back in 2000.
But he also donated to John McCain that same year.
So he's not beholden to any one party.
Nope. He's playing his own game.
Which, again, reinforces this idea that he's a pragmatist focused on outcomes more than ideology.
100%. It's about working with whoever he thinks can get him those results.
It's fascinating how wealth and influence can blur those traditional political lines. You know what I mean?
It's like he's operating on a different plane, one where relationships and access matter more than those party labels.
It really makes you think about the role of Wall Street in all of this, in shaping policy.
Well, for sure. It's not just about campaign donations anymore, right?
It's about personal connections, backroom deals, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's about the influence of people like Bessent, these guys who move seamlessly between the worlds of finance and politics.
He's almost like a whisperer, translating between Wall Street and Washington.
And he's fluent in both languages, clearly.
Makes you wonder about his motivations, right?
Always.
Is he purely driven by wanting to shape policy, or is there something else at play here?
Right. Like, does he see this political influence as a way to advance his own financial interests?
It's a valid question. I mean, his willingness to make those bold predictions, like the Kamala crash,
Oh, yeah.
could that be seen as an attempt to not just predict the future, but maybe even influence it?
Possibly. I mean, remember, he's not just observing, he's actively playing the game.
That's a good point. He's putting his ideas out there, pushing for specific policies, engaging in these public debates.
He's not shy, that's for sure.
Not at all. It's like he wants to leave his mark, not just on Wall Street, but on the whole political and economic landscape.
Yeah, like he's got a legacy in mind.
And his 3-3-3 plan is a perfect example of that, right?
Oh, yeah. It's not just some abstract theory. It's a blueprint for a very specific economic agenda.
One that happens to align perfectly with Trump's priorities: lower taxes, deregulation, energy independence.
It's like they were made for each other.
It's classic conservative economics.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that Bessent arrived at these ideas through his own analysis of the markets and the global economy, you know?
Right. It's not just ideology for him. It's about what he genuinely believes will work.
And he's not afraid to defend those beliefs, even when people criticize him for it.
Remember that grants conference incident?
Oh, yeah, when he basically went toe-to-toe with those folks who were saying Trump's policies only help the rich.
He's got no problem pushing back.
He's a true believer, at least in his own economic vision.
For sure, but it makes you wonder, what's the end game here? What's the ultimate goal?
Yeah, like what's he really trying to achieve?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Is he trying to remake America in his own image? Or is he just playing this power game the best he can?
Who knows? Maybe it's a bit of both.
I guess only Scott Bessent knows the answer to that one.
But one thing's for sure, his success hasn't come without controversy.
Oh, yeah. He's definitely made some enemies along the way.
His time at Soros Fund Management wasn't exactly a walk in the park, and his support for Trump has alienated a lot of his former allies.
He's made choices that have had consequences, both good and bad. Yeah.
Absolutely, like that bet against the British pound.
Yeah, incredibly profitable.
Yeah.
But it also raised some ethical questions.
Oh, yeah, like about the impact of these huge financial moves on everyday people.
Right, and his alliance with Trump has led some to question his principles, his motivations.
It's a classic case of do the ends justify the means?
Right, like is he willing to compromise his values to achieve his goals?
And what's he ultimately willing to sacrifice?
These are the questions that'll keep swirling around him as his story continues.
It's a complex story for a complex guy.
He's brilliant, he's controversial, he defies easy categorization.
And maybe that's what makes him so fascinating, right?
He's a walking paradox, a Wall Street elite who advises a populist president, a gay man who supports a politician often seen as socially conservative, a former Soros protege who champions a conservative economic agenda.
It's like he's a living embodiment of the contradictions of our time.
He forces us to confront the complexities of power, of influence, of the whole idea of the American dream.
It's a story that can only happen in America, you know?
Yeah, a place where a kid from humble beginnings can climb to the top of the financial world and then use that power to try and shape history.
And his story's far from over.
Not by a long shot. And it raises some really profound questions about success, ambition, the role of individual choice in all of this.
It does make you think.
It does. So what do you think, listener? What's your take on Scott Bessent's story? What sticks out to you? You know, it's funny, when you think about it, Bessent's story really makes you question what success even means.
Oh, totally. Like, he's obviously achieved incredible financial success, but is that really all there is?
Right. Is that the end goal, or is it just a stepping stone to something else?
Like maybe political influence is part of the equation now.
Yeah, it's like he climbed one mountain and now he's looking for an even bigger challenge.
Always pushing those boundaries, testing limits, never satisfied.
And you see that drive in his personal convictions too, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like his whole stance on the culture wars, his willingness to shake things up, even if it means pissing off some of his old friends.
He's not afraid to ruffle some feathers, that's for sure.
Nope. He seems to like being the outsider, the contrarian voice.
Like he enjoys stirring the pot a little bit, you
A
know?
little bit. He loves it.
But under all that, you do get the sense that he genuinely wants to understand the world, how it works. Those forces that drive everything.
Oh, yeah. He's definitely got that intellectual curiosity.
He's not just sitting on a pile of money. He wants to figure out the bigger picture, the patterns and connections that most people miss.
And then he wants to tell everyone about it, whether they want to hear it or not.
Right, like he sees himself as this modern-day oracle predicting the future and maybe even shaping it a little bit.
He's definitely not lacking in confidence, that's for sure.
But maybe there's a bit of idealism in there too, you know?
Now I think so.
I don't know, it's just a thought, like maybe he believes he can actually use his knowledge and influence to make things better.
To guide America towards some kind of brighter future.
Exactly, like why else would he spend so much time advising a president trying to influence policy?
It's not exactly the easiest way to make a buck, that's for sure.
No, it's definitely a path full of obstacles and controversies.
But he seems to thrive on that, you know?
He does. It's like he's drawn to those complexities, to the high-stakes game of it all.
He needs that constant stimulation, that intellectual and emotional challenge.
He's a unique guy, that's for sure.
He is a mix of ambition, intellect, and, yeah, maybe even a little idealism.
And that's what makes him so compelling, right?
Totally. He reminds us that people are complicated. Their motivations aren't always clear-cut.
Even those driven by power or wealth might have other goals, other things they're striving for.
Exactly. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from Scott Bessent's story, the reminder that we shouldn't put people in boxes.
That their motivations are usually a mix of things. Ambition, conviction, a desire to leave their mark on the world.
He's a fascinating example of all that, the complexities of human nature, the unpredictable paths we take.
And his story makes us think critically about the forces at play in our world.
The role of wealth and influence, the motivations of those at the top.
It's a story that's still being written, one we'll probably be talking about for years to come.
Oh, absolutely. There are many chapters left to be written.
Well, it's been a real pleasure diving into the world of Scott Bessent with you.
Likewise, it's been a thought-provoking journey for sure.
And for you, our listener, we hope this has sparked some new ideas, some questions about the intersection of finance politics and the pursuit of power.
Keep those questions coming.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.